Hi, I'm John Sutton. I'm the site coordinator of the Hemingway Conference, along with Debbie Isaacson. And on behalf of Sheridan College, we are thrilled to have you here. And I want to thanks first to Sean Parker and Visit Wyoming. And a full video can be found on their Visit Sheridan YouTube channel, so check it out. So this event would not have been possible without our partnership with Wyoming Humanities, which is hosting the Wine of Wyoming event. They've been invaluable in putting this event together with us all these years. And yes, for those who don't know, this event has literally been years in the making. So we're really pleased that you're here and joining the ride with us. And truly, this wouldn't have been possible without the leadership of Wyoming Humanities past director, Shannon Smith, as well as their current director, Sean Reece. So before I turn the program over to Sean, I want to thank all the volunteers, as well as thank Jake Hirschman, who has been so flexible and accommodating in putting the events together here in Kinnison Hall. So I can say thank you to the volunteers. They've done a great job. Things are going really smoothly. And thank you to Jake back there. You've been terrific. Thank you. We appreciate it. So when Craig and A are done with their Q&A, there will be a book signing, so just follow the signage to their book signing, and yeah, that'll be a lot of fun. So without further ado, I want to introduce the Executive Director of Wyoming Humanities, Sean Reece. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Good evening. How cool is this? This is a really cool thing. We have people from around the world in Sheridan, Wyoming. It's just amazing. John, thank you. That was a very kind introduction. There's a number of people to thank, and I'm not going to be able to thank all of them, but I would really like to give a huge shout out to Debbie Isaacson. Yes. My predecessor, Shannon Smith, who has been involved in the planning for this conference for as long as John has, going back to 2017, 2018. I would like to thank members of the Board of Directors of Wyoming Humanities. A current board member and a past board member are here tonight. Norlene Healy, who I just met, who was on the board in the past, and Sarah Jo Sinclair. I would also like to thank the National Endowment for the Humanities. Through the National Endowment, through the National Endowment, we've been able to do a number of things. We've been able to put together the Travel Story GPS Hemingway Highways, which you can access at the Wyoming Humanities website, thinkwy.org, which will tell stories across the state of Wyoming of Hemingway's time in Wyoming. We also put together a one-book discussion group across the state working with libraries where we discussed In Our Time. And one of the presenters tomorrow, Charles Fournier, was the person who put together that discussion guide, so we're really happy about that. And we also worked with the Cheyenne Symphony Orchestra to put together a symphony based on Hemingway's time in Wyoming. So I'm the Executive Director of Wyoming Humanities, and it is a really great job. It is a very cool mission that we have, and it's really a mission about understanding and wisdom and idea sharing and understanding. And one of the best ways that you reach those goals of wisdom and inspiration and idea sharing and understanding is through storytelling. Wyoming has a long history of great storytellers. In the mid-19th century, in these Bighorn Mountains and across the state of Wyoming was a very influential person, a guide, a trapper, a scout, a bard named Jim Bridger. Jim Bridger was illiterate. He couldn't read. But he saved money from guides, tours that he would host for rich European aristocrats who would come to Wyoming to go on big hunting expeditions. And with the funds that he received as a guide for these European hunting expeditions, he did two things. First of all, he bought a volume of Shakespeare. And then he hired a 14-year-old German boy who could read English. And this German boy read to him Shakespeare. And Jim Bridger memorized Shakespeare. And he eventually adopted Shakespearean language, and that's how he communicated. And he communicated it to the folks at Fort Laramie and Fort Bridger, communicated it to the Eastern Shoshone and Northern Arapaho and Crow and Sioux and all of the tribes that called Wyoming home. And with Shakespeare, he was able to bring people together. He was able to use those Shakespearean themes of appearance and reality and change, order and disorder. He told stories through Shakespeare's voice, using pun and metaphor and comedy and tragedy. And this universal language of Shakespeare brought together these tribes who had been at war with one another, and the white settlers. And he was able to build a common language of understanding. And that's the power of storytelling. Wyoming has a long history of storytelling and storytellers. From Owen Wister to Hemingway, from Annie Proulx to Nina McConaughey, from Zane Grey to C.J. Box. Wyoming is a place that inspires stories. And tonight we are so happy to have one of Wyoming's most preeminent storytellers. Craig Johnson, he's the author of the New York Times best-selling Walt Longmire series, and he's one of America's most popular mystery writers. His work has been translated into at least 14 languages, and he's earned the Western Writers of America Spur Award, the Watson Award, and others. His novella, Spirit of Steamboat, was first selected as the first one-book Wyoming community read. And I just learned tonight our former board member, Norlene Healy, was in charge of the first one-book discussion groups in libraries across the state. The Longmire books were adapted into a blockbuster television series, which I don't need to tell you this. And even the Buffalo Chamber of Commerce hosts Longmire Days, an annual festival celebrating Johnson's work and all things Longmire. And they do great work. Craig was on a panel yesterday talking about revenue that the Longmire Foundation receives that's been going to help fund missing and murdered Indigenous women. Craig lives with his wife Judy, who I met tonight, on a ranch that he built in Ucross, which I have to say has a population of 26. I'm so happy to introduce Craig, who is going to introduce our other very special guest, A Martinez. So with no further ado, please welcome Craig Johnson and A Martinez.
Hi. Hey. How are you guys? Oh, Hold on, I have to get my safety glasses on here. Hold on. And then I decide, like, if I'm going to wear my suit jacket or not, but I guess I'm going to try. If I suddenly yank it off and throw it over to the chair, you'll know what happened. Like that, so. Garrison Keillor once said that he went to a book reading and something terribly tragic happened. This guy started reading from his book. And the problem, of course, is that if you ask an author to speak at a literary conference honoring another author, they might want to read something of their own. So when John and Debbie got in touch with me about doing the International Hemingway Association Conference, I immediately began thinking about my relationship with the man and his work. And I didn't have to think for very long or go very far, because sitting on my writing desk, front and center, is a rather large and ornate ashtray from Harry's New York bar in Paris, which was one of Hemingway's, local hangs like that. And so I didn't have to look very far for that like that. And I have to admit that when they asked me to read something of my own tonight, I at first declined like that, and I said, no, I don't think that's kind of disingenuous, like that, to read something of your own like that, when you're honoring another author like that. And they said, well, why don't you think about, something in your books that's Hemingway-esque, Now, right there, that says something. When they start using your name as an esque, you've arrived, and I said, no, I'm not really completely comfortable with that like that. But that is the worst thing you can do to an author, is plant that snipe hunt in their mind, because immediately I started thinking about it. I started thinking, okay, out of 18 novels, 2 novellas, and an entire collection of short stories, have I ever written anything that's even remotely Hemingway-esque, And so I'm going through the Rolodex in my head, trying to think, well, there was that one sequence, yeah, there was that one character, there's this one thing. And so I finally settled on this one in particular. I ran onto it. It was discovered while looking in Land of Wolves from 2019. There's a scene between an adolescent Walt Longmire and his father, which bears a striking resemblance to Hemingway's Nick Adams stories like that. So with your allowance, like that, I'd like to give you guys a brief reading. Think of this as something of a appetizer in comparison with the meal that we're going to be having later on this evening like that. And so don't take this too seriously or out of context here. I could hear the water of the Middle Fork down below, and the breeze that fluttered the new chartreuse leaves of the cottonwood trees that had just broken free a week ago. The leaves flickered an almost radioactive color green and twirled like a kaleidoscope caught in the light of the flashlight, sending me back to a time when I was a kid, fishing with my father, and was getting to know this very canyon. "What are you reading, son?" I lowered my book and looked at him. "The Outlaw Trail, History of Butch Cassidy." He threw out another graceful cast, one that seemed to me any trout in a 10-mile length of the Middle Fork of the Powder River would be happy to lay into, even this early in the season. "The Charles Kelly book?" "Yes, sir." He nodded, his gray eyes following the fly as it drifted near the opposite bank on a cool March morning with the melting snow wetter than a well, the hanging droplets clinging to the underside of the bushes. "Good book." He wrote it when there were still people around who knew the Wild Bunch, primary research material being the best. "Yes, sir." "Is that my signed first edition?" "Yes, sir." Giving up on the cast, he stripped the 5-weight line in and prepared to present another to the finicky fish. "You'll make sure that you keep it dry and that it returns to my study undamaged?" "Yes, sir." Watching the ripples that swept under the skim ice of the water where the sun reflected like a jewel case, I kept wondering, why are we here? I guess because it was uncommonly warm for that time of year, and my father had gotten one of his wild hares and decided that we should go fishing. We tromped through the snow and broke a trail down into the river where he stood and I sat, having scraped the snow from a boulder. He flicked the rod tip forward, but just as he did, the wind came up and carried the gray hackle peacock into the bushes on the other side. March in Wyoming is a useless month, where all you can do is wish the wind would stop blowing. He yanked, but the fly stayed stuck. Little wonder to me that Sparina of the Harrispix warned Caesar of the Ides of March. He yanked again, but this time the leader broke, the gossamer line falling to the water without the lure. Damn. He pulled another fly from the small wool patch on his vest as I asked about the outlaw. He never killed anybody. Butch Cassidy? Sliding his glasses onto his nose, he slipped the leader's tippet through the eye of the fresh fly, expertly tying a clinch knot and clipping the tag end with a small tool that hung from his vest. Nope. And he said he never robbed an individual, just banks and railroads that he said had been robbing the people for years. I watched as my father flipped his arm back to a 10 o'clock position, the line looping out behind him and then suddenly forward, sending his hand-tied fly across the water and under a large bush that hung over the fast-moving brook. But he robbed banks, and banks are where people keep their money. I guess he didn't think of it that way. He adjusted, playing in a little and then mending the line, keeping the arc upstream. Anyway, he went to jail for that, but at his parole hearing, he promised the judge that he'd never rob another bank in Wyoming. Did he? No, he went and robbed banks in Utah and Nevada. So I guess he was a man of his word of sorts. I glanced around the canyon, and they used to be here. My father nodded his head upstream. One of their hideouts, a cave, was over there, so they say. Can we go see it? He turned toward me. I thought we were here to fish. Well, we are, but maybe after we catch a few. We come back to camp empty-handed, and that mother of yours is going to think we were down here taking a nap. Yes, sir. Dutifully placing the book in my rucksack, I picked up a rod and pulled a few yards of line from my own reel, draping it out in the water and flipping it forward, roiling the line about a yard from his. Poacher. Our lines danced to the right in the vibrant water. Do you think they were bad men? He thought about it as he stripped his line in. Well, it's debatable as to whether Butch killed anybody, but at least 3 of the others did. Fingering a tug on my line, I lifted and watched as a 12-inch brown trout arched and then spit my fly back at me. Damn. I've told you, don't pull up on the hook. Go sideways and preferably upstream so the current does some of your work for you. I moved past him and redirected my cast. He had pulled his own line in and then threw it, and I watched as the gentle loop played out on the surface of the water and an even larger brown snapped at the fly, my father steadily hauling him in. I watched as he netted the fish, carefully taking it and slapping its head against a nearby boulder before flipping open his fillet knife, cleaning him out, and placing him on the dampened moss and the willow creel. But Butch and Sundance, they never killed anybody. He stood, towering above me. That's the story. So maybe they weren't such bad guys. Maybe they were just rejecting the rules of society and wanted to make up their own game. His voice took on a different tone. They were thieves, Walter. They took things that didn't belong to them, intimidating and harassing people all over the country. The amount of effort that they put into stealing and hiding, think what they could have accomplished if they'd turned their efforts towards an honest life. Gunned down at 40 years of age, they were men of low character, and they all met bad ends. I quickly stripped him my line and waited, and then watched as he moved up the bank. He turned and looked back at me. There is a tendency these days in our society to romanticize the exploits of outlaws and gangsters, an insistence that these Robin Hood-type characters, that they have more in common with us than the people whom we hire to protect us and enforce our laws, and I don't buy that. I think that when you pick up a gun and you use it to take things away from people, it doesn't matter how clever or charming or handsome you are, you're just a thief. Plain and simple. I nodded. He studied me for what seemed like a long while. You want to go look at that cave? Yes, sir. He started off as I secured my line and stumbled after him with a hidden smile. So, how do you get low character anyway? He called back over his shoulder. By not listening to your father. It is not lost upon me that a couple of months ago I wrote the keynote speech that you're hearing tonight at the age of 61 in Hemingway's house in Ketchum, Idaho. Sitting there in the chair amid the quiet roar of the Big Wood River, overshadowed by the snow-capped peaks of the Hemingway Boulders Wilderness area, I couldn't help but be reminded of Wyoming, my home state and a place that Hemingway would revisit. With the International Hemingway Association Conference being held here in Sheridan, I set out to find something unique concerning the man and the geography and was immediately thwarted. Has there ever been a writer whose life and work has been gone over with a fine-tooth comb as much as Ernest Hemingway? When I set out to write the keynote for this year's conference, I was determined to try and find something different. But that can sometimes be a bit of a challenge when dealing with a subject matter whose every minutia has been studied to the nth degree. The man's works, fiction, nonfiction, the books written about him, his philosophies, his relationships, his hunting, his fishing, the things he drank, the places he visited, his influence, quite frankly, it goes on forever. My thought instead was to simplify things and go back to the seminal motivations in Hemingway's writing and the thing that they all share. I was on my way down to the barn to field the horses one night and was grumbling about the fact that every facet of the man's life had been covered when my wife, Judy, looked up from the book that she was reading, not Hemingway, and said the word that would be the hinge pin for my speech this evening: isolation. Isolation from society, isolation from one's family, isolation from women, and finally, isolation from one's very existence. I honestly believe that Hemingway's worked his entire life to isolate himself from everyone, and then that early morning on July 2nd, 1961, he simply had no one else to isolate himself from than himself. To write successfully, I think you have to have a problem with the world and become a member of what I like to refer to as the burr under the saddle blanket school of literature. And I think it's safe to say that Ernest had a couple of those burrs from birth. Something of a disappointment to both his parents, he attempted team sports such as football back in Illinois, where he was born, but just didn't take to it, or them. Instead, he gravitated towards, of all things, boxing, preferring a sport that pitted one lone antagonist against another, a sport relying completely on the individual's skill. He proved to be accident-prone and wasn't very good at the sport, re-injuring an eye that he had hurt from a previous football injury. The sport, however, did plant a seed of the singular dramatic conflict that would inform all of his work. Boxers in a ring, hunters in the hunted bush, the wary trout biting on the nimbly cast fly, and finally, the ring pitting the bull against the matador. Like many authors, he had the temperament of a loner, making friends easily and losing them even more easily. He didn't want to go to college. He wanted to join the action in the Great War instead, but the eye damage he'd sustained ruled that out. Instead, at the age of 18, at the urging of his parents, he followed a career in journalism with the Kansas City Star that gave him even more of the outsider's perspective to a society to which he bore witness. So at the age of 18, he was exposed to the police and hospital beats of Kansas City, therefore becoming familiar with the ferocity of life and death in all its forms. He became cynical and tough on the outside and in his writing, with a terse masculine style that moved away from the more florid literary fashions of American writing up until that point. He still wanted to go to war, and though through the Red Cross, found a way into Europe, the front, where he was almost killed by an Austrian mortar shell, which landed him in a military hospital in Milan, where he had, of all things, fallen in love. Refused by the first great love of his life, drifting and unmoored, he returned to the U.S. To relief of his parents, he, however, did finally get married. He did little to settle down, however, and at the advice of other writers, decamped to Paris to make a foreign correspondent. So bored with journalism, he tried again to retreat into the world of fiction. The Hemingways were expecting their first child and so went to Toronto so that they could save enough money for their little family to finally return to Paris, where he could try being a writer in an all-out single-minded attempt. And these efforts led to shorter works, and then the writer's first novel, The Sun Also Rises. It also led to a divorce and his moving to Key West, near the sea, where he referred to as the last free place. He wrote A Farewell to Arms and was in the process of editing it when he decided to escape the heat and humidity of Florida and head west. Tonight we are here in the least populated state in America. I say that with a great deal of pride. Is there any reason at all as to why Hemingway wouldn't have loved the cabins at Spiro Wigwam or the room at the Sheridan Inn where he actually finished A Farewell to Arms? There is no better place to hide than in the isolation of Wyoming, where you can escape everything. Everything except yourself. I don't think there's a better way to explore and celebrate the life of an author more than to let their words speak for themselves. And the work which exemplifies the state where we are now would have to be Wine of Wyoming. Hemingway's love affair with Wyoming was like his love affairs with women, sporadic, torrid, but he was looking for something here. He rolled his car here and almost killed himself and even attempted to walk into a moving propeller and got married here. A lot of rough things, but the fishing was good. In 1928, Hemingway had escaped to Wyoming to do a little of that fishing in the Bighorn Mountains with his buddy Bill Horn. As the story goes, the fishermen as they sometimes do, got thirsty and set out on a mission. During Prohibition, hard drink was not easy to find, and even more so in the sparse population of the High Plains. Nothing if not enterprising, however, Hemingway and Horn soon found themselves sitting in the vine-shaded porch of Charles and Alice Mancini, who had, unbeknownst to the two of them, would soon achieve literary immortality as the models for Sam and Madame Fontaine as the short story Wine of Wyoming. Hemingway even wrote to his friends in Paris, assuring them that they need not be concerned for his welfare, that he had found good wine from a nice bootlegging family near Sheridan. Sheridan really hasn't changed all that much, I don't think. In October, Hemingway wrote Maxwell Perkins, his editor at Scribner's, excited about a straightforward short story he'd stumbled upon while finishing his latest novel. And optimistically stating that the short story was about 3/4 done, Hemingway defended not translating the French sequences. Don't let anybody tell you that there's too much French in it. Everyone who reads Scribner's knows some French, or at least knows somebody that knows some French. Not one of the more well-known works, Wine of Wyoming, suffers inaccessibility by being a great deal in French, and as it turns out, not that indeed many Scribner's readers could read and write French, including, as it turned out, Ernest Hemingway. With my first thought of making this short story the centerpiece of the keynote this evening, I had contacted my good friend and French translator, Sophie Aslanides, about providing her much-needed assistance. How goes the translation? The whine of long distance across the Atlantic whined in my ear. Horrible. First I had to translate the French into French. I don't understand. Her voice took on an apologetic tone. I'm really sorry, but it's rubbish. His French is really horrible. Hemingway claims to have indeed learned the language from reading French newspapers, which in some way explains the haphazard understanding of French grammar. The aspect of the story having been mentioned in the criticisms leads one to believe that not that many fluent French speakers have actually read the story. Wine of Wyoming's simplicity and sensitivity, however, was remarked on by critics when it was first released in the collection Winner Take Nothing, but soon fell out of favor with the public. One would surmise from a distinct lack of accomplished readers of the French language in Scribner's subscribers or in any other magazine. It's a good story, a slice of life as Hemingway himself described it, that compares and contrasts the chasm that separates the graciousness of the old world and the roughshod of the new. The sensibilities of the immigration, the nationalistic intolerance are there, but they are overshadowed by the one thread that stitches the story together, the one immersed in all of Hemingway's work: isolation. Even the first sentence of the story tells what is about to play out. It was a hot afternoon in Wyoming. The mountains were a long ways away, and you could see snow on their tops, but they made no shadow. And in the valley, the grain fields were yellow. The road was dusty with cars passing, and the small wooden houses at the edge of town were baking in the sun. I don't know about you guys, but that's kind of the landscape that I drove in this morning. I think we're going to have to take a look at that. There's no particular reason as to why Hemingway amorphized the Italian Mancinis into the French, but one could assume that it had been because of the familiarity with the culture from his time spent in Paris. Even though the Fontaines live, work, and have children in Wyoming, they are strangers in a strange land, continually assaulted by would-be customers whom the steadfast Madame Fontaine turns away. The narrator is never named, but it's easy to see Hemingway, a well-traveled, if world-weary individual who seems somewhat out of place himself. The two discuss their dissatisfaction with family, politics, and religion, and the narrator returns that night for dinner with the couple and is introduced to the Fontaine's son, Andre, who seeks escape through movies, future hunting escapades, and novels such as Frank on a Gunboat. I looked it up. It really does exist. The author and entire series was entitled Frank Before Vicksburg, Frank the Young Naturalist, Frank on the Prairie, Frank in the Mountains, Frank in the Woods, and Frank Among the Rancheros, just to name a few. But I digress. An easy cordiality develops between the narrator and his wife and the French couple over a series of dinners culminating in a farewell meal to include numerous bottles of wine. In typical Hemingway fashion, the complexities of existence override the celebratory dinner when the narrator and his wife don't make it back for the scheduled evening and instead show up the next day to find the wine has been consumed. Attempts are made to culminate the festivities, but they fail, and the two couples part company, likely to never see each other again. The Wine of Wyoming, never to be drunk. This is a dangerous path for an author, but one that Hemingway treads easily. avoiding the potholes of sentimentality and ruts of sugar-coated nostalgia. The terse brevity of mind, the thought and narrative serves him well here, not abandoning the romanticism, but highlighting it through a sense of sparsity. There is a melancholy of Wine and Wyoming, a constructive erosion of warmth that finally leads to a detached coolness, a sadness that permeates the desperate attempts of the characters to reach out to each other in search of a genuine connection, to hold in abeyance the weight and unending time and distance. A perfect setting for Wyoming. Most of our lives are spent in an unsuccessful attempt to ignore or distract ourselves from the isolation of our existence, but Hemingway embraces that solitude, and it fueled the raveling and unraveling of these characters. The ending of Wine of Wyoming carries the significance of the isolation as the narrator and his wife motor away. We were through the town and out on the smooth road beyond, with a stubble field of grain fields on each side and the mountains off to the right. It looked like Spain, but it was Wyoming. The conversation goes on with a sense of foreboding that culminates in a failed election, a stock market crash, and a full-blown depression. But Hemingway, in my opinion, sticks the ending with the understated and sublime quality that had served him so well with the final sentence of The Sun Also Rises only 2 years earlier. I don't think Hemingway was out to save the world with Wine of Wyoming, but to illustrate it as it was, or is, in his eyes. Did he succeed and come to terms with the isolation from society, isolation from family, isolation from women, and finally, isolation from one's very existence? The first fundamental response would be no. But in a way, perhaps he did. Thank you. You want to know how smart a Wyoming writer is? Smart enough to get a professional actor such as Mr. A. Martinez to read Wine of Wyoming for us tonight. A. Martinez is an Emmy Award-winning actor who's been working professionally since 1968. You were 3 when you began your career, as I recall, yes?
I wish.
In 1972, he appeared notably as the outcast Cimarron in the John Wayne film, The Cowboys. And I have to admit that, like with my time spent in the saddle, I thought he did an absolutely convincing job as a cowboy. The only part that was completely unbelievable with me was that he didn't sleep with Colleen Dewhurst. He keeps telling me that's because she was married to, who was the guy she was married to?
George C. Scott.
Yeah, him, yeah. So, he played the badass activist Buddy Redbow in 1989's Pow Wow Highway, one of my absolute favorites. With actual scenes that were filmed here on the main street in Sheridan. As a matter of fact, I think there's still a Sheridan County Sheriff's Department warrant for your arrest for the theft of a car stereo, I believe, like that. So, he also played Meryl Streep's gigolo Butler Garcia in the 1990 film She-Devil, in the popular and critically acclaimed Netflix series Longmire, and has recently delivered memorable performances in the live reboot of Cowboy Bebop, FX's Queen of the South, and this year's Jake Gyllenhaal theatrical thriller Ambulance. Martinez was a senior in high school when he first encountered Hemingway. He describes the experience of reading A Farewell to Arms as the dawning of a lifelong reverence for the exalted power of art. It's been my privilege to get to know and call this thinking man's actor a friend. Now you may ask, what exactly is a thinking man's actor? He reads. In the decade that I have known him, I have never seen him back away from a cause or a conflict in a way that few performers might risk in times of political correctness. Not only is he frighteningly intelligent, but he is courageous and kind to a fault. And I cannot think of a single voice I would rather hear read tonight's presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. A. Martinez.
I think I speak for a lot of people in this room when I say the day I became aware of Craig Johnson's existence was a good day in my life. was a hot afternoon in Wyoming. The mountains were a long way away, and you could see snow on their tops, but they made no shadow. And in the valley, the green fields were yellow, the road was dusty with cars passing, and all the small wooden houses at the edge of town were baking in the sun. There was a tree that made shade over Fontaine's back porch, and I sat there at a table, and Madame Fontaine brought up cold beer from the cellar. A motor car turned off the main road and came up the side road and stopped beside the house. 2 men got out and came in through the gate. Madame Fontaine stood up. "Where's Sam?" one of the men asked at the screen door. "Fontaine ain't here." "You got some beer?" "No, ain't got any beer. That's the last bottle, all gone." "What's he drinking?" "That's the last bottle, all gone." "Come on, give us some beer." "You know me." "Ain't got any beer. That's the last bottle, all gone." "Come on, let's go someplace where we can get some real beer," one of them said. And they went out to the car. One of them walked unsteadily. The motor car jerked in starting, whirled on the road, and went on and away. "Put the beer on the table," Madame Fontaine said. "What's the matter? What's the matter? Don't drink on the floor." "I didn't know who they were," I said. "My God, they're drunk," she said. "That's what makes the trouble. Then they go somewhere else and they say they got it here. Maybe they don't even remember." She spoke French, but it was only French occasionally, and there were many English words and some English constructions. She was a plump old woman with a lovely, ruddy complexion and white hair. She was very clean, and the house was very clean and neat. She came from Lens. "Where did you eat?" "At the hotel." "Eat here. You shouldn't eat at the hotel or the restaurant. Eat here." "Well, I don't want to make trouble for you, and besides, they eat all right at the hotel." "I never eat at the hotel. Only once in my life I ate at a restaurant in America. They gave me pork that was raw. And my son is married with an American. And all the time he eats beans in cans. She doesn't cook. She gives him beans in cans." "What does she do?" "All the time she reads. Nothing but books. All the time she stay in bed and read books." "He's a good boy. He works hard. He worked in the mines, and now he works on a ranch. He never worked on a ranch before, and the man who owned the ranch said to Fontaine that he never saw anybody work better. Then he comes home, and she feeds him nothing. All the time she says, 'Son of a bitch, goddamn.' She don't work. All she does is read and go to the show." "Have you got any more beer?" "My God, yes, sure. You come and eat with us tonight." "All right, what should I bring?" "Don't bring anything, nothing at all. Maybe Fontaine will have some of the wine." That night I had dinner at Fontaine's. We ate in the dining room, and there was a clean tablecloth. We tried the new wine. It was very light and clear and good, and still tasted of the grapes. At the table there were Fontaine and Madame. "What did you do today?" Fontaine asked. He was an old man with small, mine-tired body, a drooping gray mustache and bright eyes, and is from the Centre near Saint-Étienne. "I worked on my book." "Were your books all right?" asked Madame. "He means he writes a book like a writer, a novel," Fontaine explained. "Eat," said Madame Fontaine. "You haven't eaten anything." I had eaten 2 helpings of chicken and French fried potatoes, 3 ears of sweet corn, some sliced cucumbers, and 2 helpings of salad. "I'll get some more beer," Madame Fontaine said. "If you work all day in a book factory, You get hungry. She doesn't understand you're a writer, Fontaine said. He was a delicate old man who used the slang and knew the popular songs of his period of military service at the end of the 1890s. He writes the books himself, he explained to Madame. You write the books yourself? Madame asked. Sometimes. Oh, she said. Oh, you write them yourself? Oh. Well, you get hungry if you do that too. Eat. She nudged the plate toward me. Labor Day, we all went to Clear Creek. Oh, my God, you ought to have been there all right. We all went in the truck. We left on Sunday. It was Charlie's truck. We ate, we drank wine and beer, and there was a Frenchman who had brought absinthe, Fontaine said. A Frenchman from California. My God, we sang. There's a farmer come to see what's the matter, and we give him something to drink, and he stayed with us a while. There were some Italians come too, and they want to stay with us too. We sung a song about the Italians, but they don't understand it. They didn't know we didn't want them, but we didn't have nothing to do with them, and after a while, they went away. All the women slept in the truck, the men next to the fire. In the night, I hear Fontaine come to get some more wine, and I tell him, Fontaine, my God, leave some for tomorrow. Tomorrow they won't have anything to drink, and then they'll be sorry. But we drank it all, Fontaine said. And the next day, there is nothing left. Marie, go get some beer, Fontaine said. Monsieur is thirsty. Me too. She went downstairs, and we heard the stairs creaking. Fontaine and I sat at the table, and he poured the beer from the last bottle into our 2 glasses, leaving a little in the bottom. The next afternoon, I drove out to Fontaine's through the shade of the town, then along the dusty road, turning up the side road and leaving the car beside the fence. It was another hot day. Madame Fontaine came to the back door, still looking like Mrs. Santa Claus, clean and rosy-faced and white-haired and waddling when she walked. My God, hello, she said. It's hot, my God. She went back into the house to get some beer. I sat on the back porch and looked through the screen and the leaves of the tree at the heat and away off the mountains. There were furrowed brown mountains, and above them 3 peaks and a glacier with snow that you could see through the trees. The snow looked very white and pure and unreal. Madame Fontaine came out and put down the bottles on the table. What do you see out there? The snow, I smiled. It's pretty, the snow. Where is Fontaine? He stays with the wine. He has to watch it now to catch it just right. I sipped the beer. It's good. You like Fontaine. But there was a thing here that I never saw. I don't think you've ever seen it either. There were Americans came here and they put whiskey in the beer. No, I said. My God, yes, that's true. And also a woman who threw up on the table. Excuse me? Fontaine came up from the basement and sat in a chair. It's true. She threw up on the table. And then she threw up on her shoes. And afterward, they come back and say they want to come again and have another party the next Saturday. And I say, no. When they came, I locked the door. They're bad when they're drunk. Madame continued, in the wintertime, when the boys go to the dance, they come in the cars and wait outside and say to Fontaine, hey, Sam, sell me a bottle of wine. Or they buy the beer, and then they take the moonshine out of their pockets in a bottle and pour it in the beer and drink it. That's the first time I ever saw that in my life. They put whiskey in the beer. My God, I don't understand that. They want to get sick, so they'll know they're drunk. We also get the very nice, very decent people, he said. There are officers from the 4. Very nice men, good fellas, everybody who was ever in France. They want to come and drink wine. They like wine, all right. There was one man, Madame Fontaine said, and his wife never let him get out. So he tells her he's tired. And she goes to bed, and when she goes to the show, he comes straight down here, sometimes in his pajamas with just a coat over them. Maria, come beer, some beer now, he says, for God's sake. He sits in his pajamas and drinks the beer, and then he goes up to the fort and gets back in bed before his wife comes home from the show. I have to go away tomorrow, I said, to the Crow Reservation. We go out there for the opening of prairie chicken season. Yes? You'll come back here before you go away. You'll come back here, all right? Absolutely. Then the wine will be done, Fontaine said. We'll drink a bottle together. 3 bottles, Madame Fontaine said. I'll be back, I said. We count on you, Fontaine said. Good night, I said. We got in early in the afternoon from the shooting trip. We had been up that morning since 5 o'clock. The day before, we had had good shooting, but that morning we had not seen a prairie chicken. Riding in the open car, we were very hot, and we stopped to eat our lunch out of the sun under the tree beside the road. The sun was high, and a patch of shade was very small. We ate sandwiches and crackers with sandwich filling on them, and were thirsty and tired and glad when we finally were out and on the main road back to town. We came up behind a prairie dog town and stopped the car to shoot at the prairie dogs with the pistol. We shot 2, but then stopped because the bullets had missed, glanced off the rocks and the dirt, and sung off across the fields. And beyond the fields, there were some trees along a watercourse with a house. And we did not want to get in trouble from stray bullets going toward the house. So we drove on and finally were on the road coming downhill toward the outlying houses of the town. Across the plain, we could see the mountains. They were blue that day, and the snow on the high mountains shone like glass. The summer was ending, but the new snow had not yet come to stay on the high mountains. There was only the old sun-melted snow and the ice. And from a long way away, it shone very brightly. We wanted something cool and some shade. We were sunburned and our lips blistered from the sun and alkali dust. We turned up the side road to Fontaine's, stopped the car outside the house and went in. It was cool inside the dining room. Madame Fontaine was alone. Only 2 bottles beer, she said. It's all gone. The new is no good yet. I gave her some birds. That's good, she said. All right, thanks, that's good. She went out to put the birds away where it was cooler. When we finished the beer, I stood up. We have to go, I said. You come back tonight, all right? Fontaine, he's going to have the wine. We'll come back before we go away. You go away? Yes, we have to leave in the morning. That's too bad you go away. You come tonight, Fontaine will have the wine. We'll make a party before you go. We'll come before we go. But that afternoon, there were telegrams to send, the car to be gone over, a tire had been cut by a stone and needed vulcanizing. And without the car, I walked into the town, doing things that had to be done before we could go. When it was supper time, I was too tired to go out. We did not want a foreign language. All we wanted was to go early to bed. As I lay in bed before I went to sleep, with all the things of the summer piled around ready to be packed, the windows open and the air coming in cool from the mountains, I thought it was a shame not to have gone to Fontaine's. But in a little while, I was asleep. The next day, we were busy all morning packing and ending the summer. We had lunch and were ready to start by 2 o'clock. We must go and say goodbye to the Fontaines, I said. Yes, we must. I'm afraid they expected us last night. I suppose we could have gone. I wish we'd gone. We said goodbye to the man at the desk at the hotel and to Larry and our other friends in the town, and then drove out to Fontaine's. Both Monsieur and Madame were there. They were glad to see us. Fontaine looked old and tired. "We thought you would come last night," Madame Fontaine said. "Fontaine had 3 bottles of wine. When you did not come, he drank it all up." "We can only stay a minute," I said. "We just came to say goodbye. We wanted to come last night. We intended to come, but we were too tired after the trip." "Go get some wine," Fontaine said. "There is no wine. You drank it all up." All the happiness went from Madame Fontaine's face. Fontaine sat down in a corner with his head in his hands. "We must go," I said. "It doesn't make any difference about the wine. You drink to us when we're gone." "That's no good," Madame Fontaine said. She shook her head. "We have to go," I said. "Goodbye and good luck. Thank you for the fine times." Fontaine shook his head. He was disgraced. Madame Fontaine looked sad. "Don't feel bad about the wine," I said. "He wanted you to drink his wine," Madame Fontaine said. "You can come back next year." "No, maybe the year after." "You see," Fontaine said to her. "Goodbye," I said. "Don't think about the wine. Drink some for us when we're gone." Fontaine shook his head. He did not smile. He knew when he was ruined. "Last night he had 3 bottles," Madame Fontaine said to comfort him. He shook his head. "Goodbye," he said. Madame Fontaine had tears in her eyes. "Goodbye," we said. We all felt very badly. They stood in the doorway, and we got in, and I started the motor. We waved. They stood together sadly on the porch. Fontaine looked very old, and Madame Fontaine looked sad. She waved to us, and Fontaine went in the house. We turned up the road. They felt so badly. Fontaine felt terribly. We ought to have gone last night. Yes, we ought to have. We rode through the town and out on the smooth road beyond, with the stubble of grain fields on each side and the mountains off to the right. It looked like Spain, but it was Wyoming. I hope they have a lot of good luck. They won't. The cement road stopped. The road was graveled now, and we left the plain and started up between 2 foothills, the road in a curve and commencing to climb. The soil of the hills was red. The sage grew gray in clumps. And as the road rose, we could see across the hills and away across the plain of the valley to the mountains. They were farther away now, and they looked more like Spain than ever. The road curved and climbed again, and ahead there were some grouse dusting in the road. They flew as we came toward them, their wings beating fast, then sailing in long slants and lit on the hillside below. We ought to have gone last night. Yes, I said. We ought to have gone. Thank you. It was my pleasure.
It's obvious that you brought your craft to that reading. And we have time for some questions and answers, and I hope there are some questions about choices that you need to make in that reading. And I hope there are some questions about Craig's stuff. So do we have any questions from the audience?
There you are.
You're all stunned. There's a question over here.
Thank you very much for a wonderful reading. That was just transformative. I noticed, or think I noticed some differences occasionally when you would speak in the voice of the narrator, but when the narrator would begin to describe the landscape, there was a little bit more shape, the long flight of the bird. Can you talk about how you decided to stay sort of with the dialogue in one sense, but then move into a different narrative voice?
So the question is about A's changing voice from narration to dialogue.
Well, I just, I'm so reverent, really, toward poetry. And I think that there's so much poetry in his language, in this book in particular, you know. And I know that it struck me when I first read A Farewell to Arms, you know. I'd never encountered prose that had that kind of grace in it, you know. A lot of it is, you know, the trick of alliteration, but you know, it's more than that, you know. I mean, you know, it made shade, you know. And, you know, he just, when he goes into that vein, he just, it's a flight of grace that I just think is so wonderful. It's something I admire most in the world, actually. I love it so much. So one of the treats of getting asked to do this was to, you know, was to have that to go on, you know. And I feel that way. I know there was a passage that Craig wrote in this book, Depth of Winter, where, you know, early on when Walt has gone down into the belly of the beast in Mexico looking for something that's really going to be bad to find. And, you know, he's just speaking of the mountains, looking at the mountains, right? And I was thinking about that, you know, how that struck me, because you know what it's like in the world, right? If we're lucky, we're aware of moments of reverence, where something comes on us and we, you know, our goose flesh comes and we remember that it's a miracle that we're here. And that is such a precious thing, you know, to do without it. When people don't have that in their lives, I feel sorry for them. And when you see an artist render something that gets you close to remembering that, I just think that's a tremendous, great service and gift, and you know, it's all over this. So I was just thrilled that I got to like jump on these things and, you know, stretch them out, because they hold up if you take your time. Thank you for that question, though.
How about the humor? I've read that short story, I don't know how many times. Like, it was never as funny as it was tonight. I thought it was absolutely hilarious, look at for God's sake.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I think about all the time, you know, I think about, you know, acting is what I do. I'm, you know, in June I went past 54 years doing it as a pro, and I still don't exactly know what it is, you know. I don't, you know, I don't quite know exactly what it is. But I do know that one thing you notice is that the main thing is you just, whatever you imagine you should try to do, you just got to go all in. You know, you just got to go all in. And when you see, you know, we're so lucky now at this point in time, we see such great acting all the time if we want to, if we're willing to, you know, cough up the money for the streaming services and stuff. I mean, it's different than watching what television used to be. It's like watching great art. It's all over the place. And you can just sit there and watch it and watch it and watch it. And I just, you know, you know, it's like going to school, and one of the things that you notice that all the people that do it well have in common is they're just incredibly brave about deciding to do something and then just doing it. You know, they're not kind of being shifty about it. They're actually going to go do that. And so anyway, I'm glad you laughed so much. I'm so glad you laughed. I'm so glad you laughed.
Other questions? There's one back there.
Could you describe the emotional effect of the ending of that story as a performer?
The emotional effect of the end of the story as an actor.
Well, I think it's so interesting, given the things you were saying about him. I mean, he chose not to go, and he knew by then what that would cost those people, and he was tired, and this was the last day he'd ever seen them, and he chose to leave them hanging, and I just thought, well, there it is in a nutshell. We ought to have gone, but in a certain way, there was no way they were going to go. Once it was inconvenient, once it was like where the need to have another drink was not as pressing as the need to get some rest, it was like no question that they wouldn't go. And I just think, it's, I mean, I love that about him, about, his capacity to write without sentimentality and just to lay it out for what it is, I mean, that's the path he was on, and I find that really compelling. I suffer from not having enough of that in my life. I think, I suffer from being, just constantly, there's a problem with everything you choose to do, and I love it as an actor that I get to actually sometimes play parts of people who are not like that at all, who are utterly selfish, and and it's fun to do that. So I enjoyed it. I enjoyed actually finding a way to say that last line that felt true.
I do feel like that it also had a great deal in common with that ending. The sun also rises, like that. Isn't it pretty to think so? And I remember underestimating that end line when I first read that novel. And I truly think that one of the worst disservices you can do is come to an author too soon, when you're not really prepared and you're not equipped, to really understand what it is they're doing and how they do it. And thank goodness, I've lived long enough to be able to circle back around, to a lot of those particular pieces like that and discover the genius, that's hidden in that lighter touch, I think, which is a wonderful ending in this piece, I think.
I appreciate what you said in your remarks about isolation. There are a number of folks who talked about this story today, and one of the themes that they talked about was the theme of regret. And they also brought up what you did, the old world versus the new world, old world steeped in traditions, and the new world ragged around the edges and leading to regret. And I wonder what your thoughts might be on that.
Well, I think also, just chronologically, you can look at the period, in which the man was a product of, and you can see that there was a great deal of change going on in this country, like that, and we in ourselves, we're going from being, it's almost mirrored in the writing style, in itself, that modernist, lean and leathery style of writing, that I think, is what it is that he has to be credited for, and for anyone to say that they're not influenced by him, in modern literature, that's foolishness. There's no way that you could escape, being, crediting, giving him some sort of credit, in the style of writing that you do. But I think that's, those were always going to be those long shadows, that were going to cast across everything that he wrote. And, for me, Wyoming lends itself, very easily to that sparsity. I mean, whenever you look at those characters, standing as, vertical individuals in a horizontal landscape, there's a clarity there, that becomes, very clean and lends itself, I think, to the style of writing that he did, too. Yeah.
Question back.
You're too close.
Format of storytelling. Love the idea of storytelling. This story seems to have been one connected unit. Yet life and what happened before this unit and after that unit could be another story, like a vignette. And I don't know if this story was written with a group of vignettes or if it tended to
It was a singular piece, like from near as I could tell, like that. I mean, he was trying to finish a novel at the time, when he came up with the idea for this particular short story, like that, But I got to be honest with you, though, you're illustrating, the genius of the writer himself. That in this slim volume, in this slim story, you get a feeling that there's a past, and that there's a future, to all of these characters, like that, and when you can take a short medium like this, like that, and be able to intimate, that there's a much greater world that you're drawing from. I think that also, once again, speaks to the talent of the author, of which there's no question, to be honest. But that's interesting, though, that you should mention it in that way, that there's a world, in this little, 10 pages,
Yeah.
I have to admit, I've met Craig several times. I came hoping to be able to meet you. I have never read Hemingway, but after listening to you do that, I think I'm going to have to check out a Hemingway.
Thank you, brother. Thank you.
Newest member of the International Hemingway
Thank you.
There's a question here.
Thank you. I wanted to say that Hemingway, he wrote fictitious stories, but he drew so much from truth in his own life. And I know that as an actor, I've heard of that as a method of acting, that you draw, when you're doing a fake character, you draw from personal experiences in your own life, and that it can enhance your own performance. So I'm wondering if when you act, if you ever do that, and if you ever think about the parallel between that and being an author and being Hemingway.
Yeah, good. Yeah, excellent. I do it constantly, and I think it's a large part of why we're in this golden age of acting, because it's been so widely disseminated, and we've been watching it for a long time. You could say, oh, it's naturalistic, it's just naturalism or something, but it really, it didn't used to be that way. You look at the way that that theater was conducted before the method came, where people actually decided to actually tell the truth about how they felt about things. And, to master that demands that you look at yourself and find some level of accountability with yourself that not everybody bothers to do or needs to do, they think anyway. And it's why getting to do this is such a privilege. I didn't understand at all when I first started looking at this. I just wanted to be around the girls that were in the theater program, Because, seriously, But there's something about why are those the girls you want to be around, if you're me? And the reason you want to be around those girls is they're involved in the early stages of this exploring themselves and trying to find out things about themselves that have nothing to do with what the television show is telling you to do, or what you think, the culture is telling you to do, where you're actually really trying to find yourself. And, it made them much more adventurous than most of the girls, that weren't in the theater program. I found out the hard way. There's just, you go to the theater and the girls want to talk to you, and they want to be friendly. It's like a miracle, right? But that's what it turns into. It's like the path of telling story forces us to think about what it is we have in common. And it by its nature, it starts to make you see how you're connected in so many ways. I'm not defining myself anymore about the things I'm not. You define yourself about, I understand this. Even though I'm not this, I know what this is because I have something akin to this in my true, genuine history. So yeah, it's the grace of it. I feel that it's delivered. Getting to do this, as long as I've been able to do it, has delivered me to this dream of a life. And I didn't see it coming, but that's what it is telling the truth about yourself and what you've learned in the work. Just that.
In the writing sense, in answer, I think, to your question, like that, for me, there's a story that I trot out every once in a while. Like that, and one of my favorite statements about that was actually from Wallace Stegner on Writing and Teaching Fiction, where he says the greatest piece of fiction ever written is the disclaimer at the beginning of every book that says nobody in this book is based off anybody alive or dead. You know, that's your job, you know, to go find interesting people like that, you know, and put them in your books. And every once in a while, somebody asks me, they'll say, do you ever worry about running out of characters? And I'm like, I live in Wyoming. I'm going to write till I'm dead and barely scratch the surface, you know? So I think, you know, in some ways, a lot of people, I think, look at that and think that's, you know, like a cheap shortcut or something like that. But I don't think it is. I think it's like, you know, it's a way of defining that universality of the human condition, like to find, you know, whatever it is, that pith and marrow of a character that, you know, you're trying to track down. Yeah. And how can you not, you know, think of like people that you know and draw from them like that? I mean, my goodness, like it's just too much of an opportunity. I'll give you the Reader's Digest version of this. When I finished The Cold Dish, I sent it to my mother and father and my brother to see what they thought of it. And, you know, I remember waiting a full 48 hours before I started badgering them with phone calls. Like, and I called my brother up on the phone and I said, have you read the manuscript? And he goes, yeah, I have. And you're dead.
You're dead. You're dead.
And I said, what do you mean? Like, and he goes, Craig, the old sheriff that Walt goes and plays chess with on Tuesday nights, Lucian Conley, that's our dad. I was like, crap, I thought I hid that really well. Like, and he goes, no, he looks like Dad, he acts like Dad, he talks like Dad. The only thing you did was cut off one of his legs, and I think it's going to fool Dad. So I said, I got to go. And he goes, I bet you do. Like, and so I hang up with him, call home. I got my mother answers the phone, like that, and I said, Mom, have you guys read that manuscript I sent her? And she goes, yeah, I'm halfway through it. It's so good. I mean, she's my mother. What's she going to say, right? And so I said, has Dad read any of it? And she's like, yeah, he's about 2/3 of the way through. And I'm like, he's definitely read the Lucian parts. Like, and so I'm trying to think how I'm going to ask the next question, right? And that's, you know, when she comes back on the phone and says, honey, your father thinks he's Walt Longmire. The only thing you can count on is that if you steal somebody's life, they have no idea. They don't have any idea who they are. You know? So that's kind of handy. Look at it.
That's great. That's great. Oh, man.
Time for a couple more questions.
You guys are quiet tonight.
Most of us went to your paper session and asked our questions.
Oh, okay.
I guess I'm curious if the two of you talked about what the story is, and if your understanding of what the story is changed over time as you kept going through it. But what were your conversations about? Because it's not an easy story to wrap your mind around, and a lot of it's in French, which I personally am very grateful that it was translated.
You and me both. Yeah.
But what were your conversations wrapping your minds around what this is about?
Well, I think the main thing that, I mean, I just thought, you know, it's like, okay, I've been granted a chance to eat this incredible meal, you know. But I did kind of falter over this one moment where he talks about going away for Labor Day, I guess it is, where they go away and you know, they give the farmer booze and let him hang, and the Italians come and they sing a nasty song about the Italians without letting them know what it's about, and they ignore them until they leave, you know. And then he says, and the women all slept in the truck and the men by the fire. And then he just slips right into, you know, Fontaine came to grab more wine. I said, leave some for tomorrow. There's not going to be any, you know. And he says, well, you know, there's already no, it's all gone already. So Marie, get some beer. And, which he says a lot, right? And she, the next thing we read is that they could hear her creeping downstairs. The stairs were creaking. And I'm thinking, okay, so all the women are sleeping in the truck, and the men are sleeping by the fire, and suddenly she's creeping downstairs to get the beer, and you know, am I missing something there? Is there some, you know? And Craig
He wrote me an email, and he's like, was there a cut made here? And I was like, If there was, it was Ernest, not
was
me.
Ernest.
Like, he was like, okay.
I mean, it's fair game, and obviously he can write whatever he wants, and
It was a big car.
It's a big
It was
car.
a very large
It's a
car
large
with
car.
stairs, and
It was Charlie's truck.
yeah.
It was Charlie's special truck.
I was trying to remember, like, did I send you the version with the French, or had I already gotten
No,
the
you
translation?
spared me that
Oh,
the
okay,
terror
okay.
of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was kind of scary, like that, because I sent it off to my French translator. I didn't hear from her for like a month, and I thought it's a short story, and it's only like, a certain, like, maybe like 10%, of the entire short story. So I should hear back from her pretty quick. Like, after about a month, that's when I finally called her up and said, "What's going on?" She's like, "This is hard," so.
Craig came into the guest house where I'm staying this morning and said, "So have you memorized it? Do you have it? Have you learned it?" And I'm thinking, hold on. This is a reading, right? I mean, did you memorize it? But I mean, that's sort of.
I meant it as a lighthearted joke, but he had this like panic look on his face. All of a sudden, I was like, "Uh-oh."
But we've known each other long enough to know. I mean, I know that he will do stuff like that. And I just got to make sure I don't panic real quick. Yeah.
It is interesting though, like that, because there is like there's a false simplicity, to the short story. Like you hear it or you read it the first time and you think, okay, that's what that is. That's that. But then you go back through it again like that, and there are multi-facets like that kind of rise to the occasion like that. And once again, I have to say that I heard things tonight that after reading the short story 100 times I had not heard before. And that just is honestly amazing to me.
Well, I just think it's so beautiful and a measure of his gift that if you look, you can imagine. I mean, that's obviously, the actor's task is to imagine what it's like to be inside that organism. What is it like to be that guy and this woman, and particularly her. I mean, they're bootleggers, and they're just, that's sort of their function in the community, and who knows what else is going on. But I mean, it would get old having every time the party doesn't come, your husband just drinks everything that's there. I mean, there's a lot you can learn from understanding that, right? There's a lot.
Maybe that's why I have such an affinity for this short story.
So you just, you feel the poignancy of it. You feel the. It's just beautiful, in that regard. So, yeah.
Tonight we've had an opportunity just to hear a little bit about the beauty of both of your crafts, of writing and of acting. And I wondered if you've ever, A. Martinez, spent any time writing, and for you, of course, if you've spent any time acting.
I'm glad you brought this up because I am like haranguing him on like a weekly basis, going, why aren't you writing? You need to write like that. I mean, when you listen to him, this is the voice of a writer. It can be the voice of an actor, like that, but it's also the ability, like to pierce through things and see them as they are. Like that, he has an amazing ability as far as that's concerned. And so I have been haranguing him, for years, telling him that he needs to write. And he's finally taken up the quill, I think, to a certain extent, and actually, it wasn't that you weren't writing at all before like that, but now you've become more of a writer, I would think.
Well, you can just imagine, right? This dude, if this dude told you that he thought you should be writing, and, said it more than once, more than twice, more than 3 times, you go, holy cow, I mean, you can't take that lightly. So I'm trying, and yeah, thank you. Yeah. But and he's a wonderful actor. He did it. I saw him do a film, a short film, like on behalf of Rumi Luggage. Rumi?
Toomey.
Toomey.
Highly memorable. Highly.
But I mean, you know, he's...
I didn't have to speak a word. I had to ride a horse, you know? It was like the Gary Cooper School of Acting, horse or no horse, you know?
He was mesmerizing. And did you see him on Longmire? When he had to give you know, Lucian's ashes to, you know, I mean, come on.
You're gonna make me tell that story.
Yeah, well, you might want to, I don't know. But I mean, you know, I mean, if you can write like that, you know, you can act for sure.
They bushwhacked me into that scene. Like that is what they did. And my wife Judy's partially responsible for that happening. And what happened was, of course, like they you know, I show up and the producers and they said, go over to the costume. They got your costume ready. And I was like, I'm not gonna do this. Like it's gonna cost. They said it's gonna cost us $36,000 if you don't do it. And I'm like, they knew where to hit me, you know, because I'm so cheap, you know. I was like, okay. And so I went over there and they handed me like a black pair of pants, a black shirt, a black suit jacket, a black pair of, you know, boots, like getting a black hat. And I was like, what am I playing, an Undertaker? And they were like, yes. And they said, you don't have any lines. All you have to do, Robert is you're gonna sit there at the table with the ashes, you know, in a paper bag. And, you know, Robert's gonna come in and he's gonna start pulling out money out of his pockets, like to give to you. And it's not gonna be much, it's like 1s and 5s and all this. And what you're gonna do is just slide the ashes over to him, intimating that for that amount of money, you don't get a funeral urn, you get the paper bag is what you get. And so, you know, I remember the first take that we did, you know, and Robert's really enjoying this, like that. He's really having a good time. He's been waiting for 6 years, you know, for this, like, and I'm just like, I am so totally not into it, like that. And so anyway, like that, you know, Robert comes over. And, you know, he sits down and he starts fumbling through, you know, the money and putting it up. And I take the money and my job is to count the money and put it all together and then turn around and look at him, give him my best, you know, horse eye look, you know, and then, you know, slide the bag across like it. Well, I did it. And the director goes, cut. And he comes walking over. He goes, Craig, could you not have that creepy smile when you slide the ashes to Robert? That kind of ruins the scene, you know. And 7 takes, I think it took for me to do like a 12-second scene. Like, you know, I'm sure I cost him every bit of the $36,000. Like, you know, they'd have been a lot better off if they'd done another direction. Is all I can say. Like, so.
Sure looked good on TV.
Craig and A, on behalf of Wyoming Humanities, thank you for your reading, thank you for your words, thank you for the stories, thank you for your craft. The audience, thank you for helping us think about Wyoming's inspiration on Ernest Hemingway and the words that are sometimes difficult to wrap our minds around, but have meaning and have importance and tell us about ourselves. So we have a book signing